Talking about farts, right?
Yeah, absolutely talking about farts. We are joined actually by a good friend of mine, a person who is what is known as a luthier, or in Montreal we call you a luthier. A
Well,
luthier, a maker and fixer of guitars. It's my friend Robin. Robin, say hello.
hello.
You've been actually kind enough to join me to kind of talk about what you do, and that honestly, this has been one of the things I've been looking forward to the most, is having this conversation with you. So I appreciate you spending some time, just kind of talking about your job, like what you do, and kind of like what motivates you. So I guess might as well start at the beginning. Do you remember the last or the first time that you ever touched or looked at a guitar? Do you have like a memory in your mind's eye of
I
this?
mean, like, physically?
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, like, I like all Canadian kids who came up in the 80s and 90s, was constantly watching much music like everyone else. And I think the first guitar that ever really spoke to me was like the Gibson Explorer from the one Metallica video there.
Oh, wow.
I think that would have been like the first thing that kind of sucked me in. And then like my first guitar that I purchased was actually a fucking Strat. So
Wow. Okay.
there's
So
no.
yeah. Well, okay, but like, what about the first time you ever touched guitar? Let me tell you mine, because mine's really early, really early. When I was probably 3 or 4 years old, my dad had a guitar, like, you know, the Ovation sort of like guitars that have like the rounded back.
Indeed, I do.
So my dad had an off-brand version of that called an Applause, and
Mhm.
it was a beautiful sort of like guitar that had a plastic shell on the back, and it was sort of a black into red and brown sunburst kind of configuration. And I used to strum it, like, because my dad would just leave it out. He'd play sometimes, and you know, that was obviously my first little foray into guitar. Like I was probably 4. But when aside from seeing it in Metallica, when was the first time you actually touched a guitar? Do you remember?
I think I was about 6 or 7, and it was my grandfather's acoustic. He used to take it out every once in a while and sort of play it when we'd be visiting, kind of thing. But he wasn't like a consistent player. But it was also, I've got it over actually in a case, like over on the shelf there. I inherited it after he passed. It's like a 70s Matsumoku factory, like cheapy acoustic guitar that he had purchased somewhere. I'm gonna say secondhand because that would have been like a very him thing to do, like yard sale kind of thing.
Right.
But he'd done some work to it himself, like he had rebridged it and whatnot. And I'm not gonna judge him on the caliber of his work. I mean, it was.
Well, part of you is, like, let's be honest.
Yeah, but he was the guy who was like, tinkering in the basement. He was that kind of dude. He had rebridged it, and he'd put a couple of screws in the wings of the bridge to
Your grandfather did?
kind of. Yeah. I inherited when he passed away. I inherited a couple of his guitars, a couple that he'd worked on, and then a box of just like random parts, like acoustic bridges, old school like 60s and 70s, like plastic button 6-in-line, 3-in-line tuners, and like all this other stuff. So it was like me making the jump into Lutherie isn't really a huge stretch, given I kind of grew up seeing this guy like build anything, fix anything. He was like a woodworking type. Had a little shop in his basement, make gun stocks, and like I've got vivid memories of him from when I was a child, of him like polishing and oiling gun stocks and stuff like this. So I mean, like, me doing this now is a huge reach.
Well, let me say on behalf of myself, at least, that I'm very happy that you decided on guitars and not guns. So there you go.
There's probably more money in guns.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a market for guns.
Just saying.
Getting dark early. So would you say, actually, because I didn't know this about you, so you probably say that your grandfather was sort of like one of the first little catalysts for you being kind of a tinkerer on guitars in general.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. Just watching him fix anything as a kid, like it isn't necessarily about lutherie per se. It's just I have like this unquenchable thirst to fix stuff,
right?
Or build stuff. Like I constantly have to be doing something, making something, fixing something. Just so happened I specialized in guitars, so I'm going to be fucking poor forever. So you were, and that I sort of did know about you. You're obviously a handy person in general. Like you're good with working on things and tinkering on things with your hands, and you've even sort of made certain pieces of equipment in the shop, like sort of just through innovation and basically you've worked on just sort of anything that just needs something, you just do it and make the most out of what you have around you, right? So it's that sort of MacGyver style. Yeah.
Right? So with somebody who's such a tinkerer, do you have like a favorite type of guitar repair or task? Like the one that when you do it, you're like, yeah, okay, I can do this. I can do this all day. Do you have like out of all the tasks that you do, is there, and it could be anything. It could be, shaping a neck, or, it could be painting, it could be any of it. Do you have like a favorite task?
Pushing stuff through my table saw. Like literally any excuse. Like, oh, you need something cut to a specific size. Like, hell yeah, let's get the table saw involved. I'm always angling to use that thing for some reason.
It's a very visceral experience, the table saw. It's like,
I've had to build so many jigs and fucking fixtures and sleds and like all of this stuff for this table saw over the years. And like I've been rocking this table saw for like a decade at this point. And I don't know, there's something about it. It's like the idea of cutting something really precisely with something so huge and crude, like it's kind of a beautiful thing.
It's true. It's very true. All right. Well, on the other side then, so aside from splitting giant things in half on a table saw, what's some of your least favorite things to do? Because I follow you on Instagram, and I've seen, for example, I mean, maybe I'm blowing up the spot here, but fret pulling, not your favorite thing.
I complain about a lot of things. I mean, let's be real.
Well, I mean, yeah, but at that, yes, you do, but in a very charming way. I mean, let's be honest. But what about your? Do you have like a top 5 like things that even the things you love to complain about the most about the job?
Number 1, neck resets. Sweet fucking Jesus, what an awful task. Getting the neck off, getting it back in there, and like getting the correct neck angle. Like, I hate it. I try to avoid actually even taking them. It's such a shit show sometimes.
So neck resets are basically the devil's taint. Anything else?
I would say the neck reset takes up the top 3 of that 5 easily. Like,
so, okay, but what is it about a neck reset that makes it so cumbersome? Like, what is it? Like, walk me through it, because I mean, I know very, very little about the mechanical aspect of how to do this stuff. So let's turn this into a therapy session. Walk me through the trauma of a neck reset.
The worst part about the neck reset, aside from putting the neck on, is taking the fucking thing off. Like, I've tried a number of different techniques over the years, steaming them out, using the Ian Davlin style rods that mount into your soldering iron. Like, it's just drilling the two holes to make sure you get in on either side of the tenon. Like, you can't see what you're doing. It's like this weird job that's completely dependent on feel. There's a certain amount of guesswork involved. Like, even just drilling those two pilot holes just to get the rods or the steamer or something in there to get this neck off.
Right.
It's terrifying. Like, the pucker factor involved in that job is gigantic.
I want things to be measured in pucker factor going forward.
There's no uniformity to a lot of this stuff either. Like, certain Martins have certain joints, certain Gibsons have certain joints, like, right. and Yamahas are totally fucking different. It's like, the second you get this guitar on your bench, you're trying to, like, mentally, like, play through how you're going to do this. It's like, holy fuck, I hope I hit pocket.
So it's funny you mentioned, different, because the guitar is such a, it's something that's as decorative as it is functional. Not even decorative. Decorative is a bad word, but the form it's like a vase, right? Because vases they have a sort of a universal platonic, whatever ideal of what it might be, but all of the representations of that. And this is what guitars are. It's basically like there's the neck, the headstock going down into the body, into the bridge. So, like, it has acknowledged components, but all of those things are built differently by different people and sometimes to varying degrees of quality. The form factor of the body influences not only the way it plays, but the way it looks, the way it functions, its like its shelf life, So I think I have a basic understanding of that. It's just more like, out of all those types of guitar forms and bodies and stuff like that, probably the best and the worst of all of these different kinds of guitars. I think I have a good line on what your favorite kinds are, but, like, do you have a couple of real sentimental favorites? They could be like complete, like, bags of trash too. Like, maybe it's just something you love for its aesthetic component as opposed to its functional component. Like, do you have, like, favorites to work on or even favorites to look at?
What if I told you that there was one guitar that hits, like, all of those?
Yep.
The SG Junior. The Gibson SG Junior. It is a beautiful guitar, and it is so simple and so functional at the same time. Like, there's no fucking around. Like, you get a volume, you get a tone, you get a jack, you got a wraparound, like, stop tail bridge thing. Like, they're really well balanced. They're incredibly light.
Right.
I mean, it's all there.
So the SG Junior model, because it's simpler, because it's almost like it takes away the extra bullshit. Is that kind of what you're? Yeah,
it's everything you need in this crappy old slab of mahogany.
I've always liked the SGs. Always made me think of the '60s Batman sort of, like, curves, like the bat logo of like the tops of the wings always reminds me of the SG. I've had actually one SG that I had when I was a younger man. I had one of these. I think Monster Magnet might have played one, but it was like an SG with three humbuckers. It was a white body with gold pickups. But little did I know that I had this guitar until I was too poor to own it, and then I had to sell it for rent money like 20 years ago. But little did I know that the thing had actually been miswired, so I never actually got the full functionality of that guitar. So I had that guitar just because it looked like, and I'm not a Monster Magnet fan. It's just more like, I thought the guitar looked super cool. It was the opposite of the way that I styled myself. So it was just one of these things that ooh, that's pretty. And it was like, I think it might've been an Epiphone, because, you know, who has Gibson money? But I always thought that guitar was extremely beautiful, and then I had to hawk it for like less than $200. So it was depressing.
Ugh.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's I always loved that body. I always thought the SG was great. You know, our mutual friend Omar, who I'm in a band with, he has one, and it's his favorite one. It's his favorite one to play. Most of the time, like, the tone is perfect, the weight is perfect too, because that's the thing about the SG is that it's kind of like a sneaky Strat, you know, in a way, in the sense where it's light, so it feels very like not even there light, but it has unlike the Strat, it has a kind of very monster thick tone if you want it to, like it. Because it usually leans on humbucker pickups as opposed to single coils. Most of the time, it sounds really thick, but it's very thin on the body. It's actually very extremely light. Yeah, so good shout though. Good shout on. So you're saying the SG Junior, which is probably something that somebody would buy for like a 12-year-old, you know, who's looking to start playing guitar, is literally the platonic ideal for you for an electric guitar. Hot takes, Robin. Hot takes.
Yeah, I don't even know how to come back at that. I'm not a big humbucker guy, so I think what attracts me to the SG Junior of all things is that, like, big fat dog ear pickup, like P90 in the bridge. I'm a huge fan of, you know, big flat pickups, I guess.
So like flat, like basically flat single pickups as opposed to coiled, and as opposed to humbuckers, which is basically two single coils thrown together.
The humbucker has its place, and I've played a lot of humbuckers over the years that I've really enjoyed, but like my own personal sound, my own personal style is like sort of rests with either the P90 or the Jazzmaster, like soap bar style pickup.
Right. And you were known, like when we first started kind of like speaking to each other, you were kind of known for your work on the offset type of guitar, like the Jazzmasters and Jaguars of the world, and obviously that would lend to you having a soft spot for, you know, for P90s and stuff like that. That definitely makes sense. Like, is there a tone that you like about the P90 that is like more ideal than either a humbucker, which usually sounds a lot wider, or a single coil, which sounds more focused? What's the P90 in relation to that universe for you?
I don't know. I like really dark bassy shit. Like, as far as, you know, personal preference for sound goes, right. And like, granted, you can get some really, really bright tones out of like the Jazzmaster pickups and the P90s and what stuff, and it's more dependent on, I guess, what's in it for wiring, like what resistance
and its position on the bridge, and, you know, like basically how close to the bridge it is.
I mean, if you run one of those big fat awful Jazzmaster pickups through a 250K pot as opposed to like the 1 meg pot, like it takes all of that weird kind of chiminess out of it and makes it into this really dark sounding kind of pickup.
Right.
I've always been a huge fan of that.
How many guitars do you actually own yourself right now?
3, and then there's a 4th that I don't really own, but dude just never came to get it. So
I have some equipment like that. I have some. Some equipment like that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 61 Melody Maker. I put a considerable amount of work into turning it into an actual playable guitar again. The bill on it is fairly substantial, and should he come to clear it, I would hand him that guitar and bid him a good day. But if he doesn't come pick it up, I'm totally happy to just hang on to it forever.
So you basically bought it with sweat equity until otherwise he pays the bill.
basically, yeah. And like it's been years. I've had this thing in my possession now for like 6 years, probably.
Damn. Yeah,
Yeah.
that you're pretty much there. Like you've that's a possession is 9/10 of the law kind of situation for sure.
Yep.
So aside from the one that you now own through by essentially a proxy, what are the other three? What do you got?
I've got a 70s Yamaha. It's an SG80T. It weighs about 4 million pounds. It's a sitter.
It has a Mercury core.
Might as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like a really beautiful bastardization of like an old Supro and a Jazzmaster and sort of a Les Paul at the same time. Like,
oh wow,
it's heavy.
It's like, does it need its own stand? You know, like one of those fusion jazz players that just has the guitar on a stand he walks up to.
That would be recommended.
It's good for the back.
I've done a handful of jams with it over the years, and it's really hard on the shoulder after a while. Like it's beastly. I can see why they didn't take off. Having said that, it does sound pretty great.
I'm sure, but yeah. So the what are the others?
I've got a 90s MIJ Mustang Olympic white, the standard. It's got the contoured body and not the traditional like uncontoured slab. And then I've got a Mustang base, also Olympic white. It's pretty much it. It's a mid 2000s MIJ.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's tricky. It thumps like a Mustang bass does. I mean, it's really all you can ask for.
I like how the guitars that you own are kind of like a ragtag group. It's like you have a brother and a sister in Olympic white, and then you've got the big heavy BA Baracus guitar, and then you've got like the sort of like the outlier that had to join the group by some sort of weird happenstance. It would make a great heist movie, to be honest with you.
I feel weird that I actually have a Gibson, but I guess I don't own a Gibson. I've never owned a Gibson.
Yeah.
Because
you're caretaking for a Gibson right now. You're fostering a Gibson. Let's just say that.
It's better than birthing one, I'm assuming.
It would be really painful to birth a Gibson guitar, I think. My first electric guitar was essentially a Christmas gift that was an inheritance from my uncle. My uncle basically was totally into hair metal. And it's like at one point in his late teens, early 20s, he decided to get a job, and he completely like cut off this beautiful mop of curly locks. And all of a sudden, you know, a few months later, around Christmas time, I had this Charvel Model 6 complete unibody guitar. It has like, I think it has like the Floyd Rose sort of like tremolo sort of system. So it was I was 14. So it was the most complex and delicate guitar for somebody who's 14 years old to own as their first electric. And it sort of messed me up a little bit because it just sort of felt like metal is a world of exclusion. No matter what metal genre you're talking about, it's always subgenre. So it's designed to feel exclusionary. So getting this guitar, it was like probably as a teenager, imposter syndrome is so kind of built in, right? But
it totally goes away over time.
but this guitar was the essence of imposter syndrome, because you walk up to it and it's like you're touching an alien. Like it didn't feel like an actual guitar. Like it was beautiful. It had like its own special case, you know, like, and it's got the unibody, which is really interesting. But like I kept on thinking to this day, like it's really, really difficult to sort of like make that all work. And I don't understand why people would even do that. Like, is there a functional reason why a unibody would even be made, or is a separate neck is there a reason why the separate neck is an accepted standard? Is it just ease of building?
It would be ease of building. I mean, is separate neck an acceptable standard? There's a lot of guitars made over the years that were one piece or like one long piece and then some wings cut into a very pointy, awkward shape.
Right.
For their metal dicks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I think it's out of cost cutting more than anything for a lot of these companies just like churning out these guitars. Wood's expensive.
Yeah, wood is expensive. You have your own business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not telling you something you don't know. I'm literally just laying out the question. Was there like a reason why you decided to do this in an entrepreneurial way as opposed to maybe finding a job as a luthier with a company?
I think it's more based on region, like being in Nova Scotia. There are not a lot of places for one to pursue this as a career. So
right.
When I came back to Nova Scotia, when was it? 2013 or something? 2014. It's not easy to find a job doing this. So I kind of just realized like I'd worked as a photographer for a lot of years and was sort of, used to being my own show, I guess. And I kind of just, transitioned into doing this and being my own show.
Right.
Was it the right idea? Who knows?
Well, I mean, you definitely had a certain amount of success and profile and everything. You're usually busy, and I guess that was leading into the next part of the question. So, as an entrepreneur that does a combination of mostly repairs, probably right, and builds, how does an average year look? When you look at a year, are there like seasons of busy, or is it constant throughout the year? Like, are there periods that are busier than others? Are there periods that are more chaotic than others? And is it the same every year?
Used to be seasonal. I used to see like huge bumps in business around like, late spring because everyone goes on tour for the summer, and then like another surge in sort of like the fall because of festivals like the Halifax Pop Explosion and stuff of that nature. I would see a bit of a bump just before Christmas as well. Not just, people purchasing stuff for other people and wanting to get it dealt with before it actually goes to them at Christmas. But it seems like a lot of people during that season impulse buy for themselves.
Yeah.
So like I was seeing a bit of a surge in like, early to mid December, but I don't really have that anymore. It's pretty much just constant now at this point. To the point where I've actually had to limit pretty substantially, like how much stuff I have in, what I'm taking in, what the jobs are, and whatnot, because it becomes really unmanageable really quickly. Every guitar is a shit show in some respects. Like, well, I guess I can't really say that. Every guitar I get is a shit show at this point. Like, I'm not really a setup guy. A lot of the repair stuff I tend to do seems to be a little more structural. So that has made it so that I have to, build large and limit what I'm taking in solely to, have some sort of manageable time frame for turning these things around. It's not uncommon to have something come through the door being one thing, and then when you get it under the lens and you're really looking at it, you realize the problem is actually something else entirely, and that's the thing that actually needs to be fixed, and it's always something more substantial than what you ever planned it to be.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So we talked about this a while back, but you've set a limit, like an upper limit at certain points in a 2 or 3 month period, how many slots you give out, and that's it. Has that worked for you? Like setting those boundaries?
It works really well. I'm no longer working myself crazy. That was an issue. This is one of those jobs where you can do a 70-hour week real fucking easy.
Yeah.
And it was like I was saying yes to so many things, and then getting them on the table and starting to figure stuff out and realizing that, like, oh my God, it's so much more. And then just piss poor time management on my part, because like, I tend to get lost in things really easily. It's not like a distraction kind of thing. It's more a function of like hyper focus, where I run into a problem, and that problem is just absolutely fucking consumes me. It makes me a great repair guy. Like, believe you me, I've had to think through some pretty nutty things over the years, and come up with some really weirdo solutions. But to have everything that comes through the door be like, something extravagant, like it became really hard to manage. I ended up in 2019, like, I worked myself to the point of I broke down. Like, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, if I could continue doing this. Like, I wanted to just go get a job as a fucking dishwasher, like, or a forklift driver or something, where I just went and punched a clock and walked away. But unfortunately, I'm also not built for that.
Right. So it's almost like it almost served as like a natural reaction to your regular day to day. You almost had the impulse to have the total opposite, like no creative thinking, just put me in front of anything. Put me in front of anything and let me do something mundane for 8 hours. I get that. I totally understand. Like, was that part of it? Like setting the limits? Like, what was the impetus to set that limit? Like, how did you arrive at even the number? Like, how did that work?
The number sort of fluctuates. Like, it depends on what comes to the door. Like, right. Sometimes it's 25 cases, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 30. Like, I sort of just like arbitrarily draw the line based on what I'm getting. I've been doing this long enough now that I'm pretty good at sort of guessing how long something is going to take me.
Mm-hmm. A lot of these things, subconsciously already what things are going to be. Yeah. And I think this is probably part of the challenge of just talking about it. You are, when I was in university, one of the sort of intro to, sciences and the arts sort of courses I took one called Science as Discovery. And a lot of the ways that this course sort of like ended up affecting me were sort of like just basic concepts, like someone with know-how versus know-about. So somebody who can do versus someone who can teach. And there's a spectrum, right? So you are a person who's actually taken on apprentices. You are a know-how machine. Like you're a tinkerer, right?
But I've proven over and over again that I can't fucking teach.
but know about is a skill. Like, that's the thing. Know how is a skill, and know about is a skill. Like, to be able to do what I do for a living. Like, I work in a basically a high stress customer environment, but we all work from home. So all I have is a window like this and text messages to work with a team and teach them what to do. So like my typing fingers get, like, okay, you got to do this and this and this and this, and it's because of this and this and this and this. And just to be able to sort of explain it. My skill is in the ability to explain it. Mm-hmm. I think as a person who is stronger in know-how, like yourself, that's a challenge, right? Even me asking you questions on, how do you sort of like delve into the mechanics of what you do subconsciously? Like how do you know that this task takes you 12 minutes? You just know.
Yeah. I just know.
Yeah. and being in the environment you're a one-person show. How many apprentices do you have right now? Do you have anybody? That says a very sad question. Do you have anybody?
I've got a couple of people that kind of come and go that I am really happy with. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're apprentices. Like, I definitely have slightly more knowledge than they do in this given subject, but I mean, a lot of this job is guesswork. So, everybody brings something to the table. Do you get what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I do.
So, like, the two people that I work with off and on, like, one of them is like a sound tech who also fixes church organs. So, I mean, totally different realm, but a bit of crossover. And then one of the other fine folks that I do stuff with is by trade like a metal worker, welder, fabricator. So there's sort of like that wealth of knowledge to draw from. I may know more about this one thing, but they know way more about other things that I think are equally as important.
I've always found what you do to be fascinating in the sense that because you're dealing with like guitars are fairly, large. It's not like you're a watchmaker, but at the same time, there's a portion of precision that is in line with watchmaking. You're not a person who does maintenance on motorcycles, but you probably have a lot physically in common with sometimes adjusting things at that level. So Loothin is essentially, it's kind of like good old Loothin. That's why I only picked that up from you. But to work on guitars, it seems to sort of incorporate a lot of different disciplines that are, as much as they're based in mechanics and as much as they're based in precision, there's also, like you have to make sure something plays properly. So you kind of have to also have a listening ear. You have to be able to have the proper feel, anybody who works in a discipline that essentially is in the maintenance of an artistic object, if you will. Like, that's the most pretentious way that I can put it, or the most sort of weird way that I can put it. But
you win.
Yay. I finally have reached the apex of pretension. The question in there is, do you like playing? Yeah.
Because once in a blue moon.
Yeah, because we've talked a lot in this interview, but also just throughout the course of our friendship, about the whole idea of working on guitars versus kind of playing them, enjoying them, and doing this for as long as you have. I would venture to say that you probably have worked on more guitars than you have played them. Is that a fair statement?
Well, no, I've had to play every single guitar I've worked on.
Right.
So, I mean...
Okay. So you're going to get me on a technicality. I got you.
Yeah.
It's
easy out. Easy out.
It's more like your comfort level with working on guitars and knowing all the different components and how they fit together might be something that you do more often than, playing Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah.
Or anything else on the band Steve's music list.
That thing I have never once played.
If I know you for anything, it's your constant playing of Stairway to Heaven.
You can't get enough.
Seriously, he's always walking up them steps. There's a lady who knows.
Is that one of those Led Zeppelin songs where that Robert Plant guy sings about his penis a whole bunch?
Oh, well, I mean, he built an entire legacy on his penis. That's living right there.
Like, are you moving on to another question? I never answered that other question. I just can skate right past.
It's all good. Okay, go for it. Go for it.
I don't play guitar. Like, I don't go off midnight and fucking noodle. Those days are long past. At the end of the day, the second I clock out of this place, like, I don't want to see a guitar again for at least 8 hours, maybe 16 if I can pull that off. I mean, I take my work home with me a considerable amount, like not actual physical guitars, but like whatever's rolling around that day, like whatever weird problem I feel the need to obsess over, I definitely take that home, spend hours upon hours reading about random super niche guitar things, because who else is going to fix it? And that's one of it was neat that you brought up sort of like me having stuff more akin with like people who do or build motorcycles or do motorcycle maintenance. It's like there's so much crossover. Like, guitar work is such a really weirdly niche thing that it requires me or someone in my position to like that niche is actually comprised of like 6 or 7 other like sub niches, which, you know, I have to like be an expert at all of them. Like whether it's doing, you know, finish work or structural woodwork, or, you know, like refretting something, or like, you know, it's like in my spare time after going to Luthier school for a while, like in my spare time, I've had to pursue like effectively fucking degrees in like 6 other subjects in order to make this job one cohesive thing. Like the number of hours I've spent, like, you know, reading about finishing techniques or watching videos of finishing techniques, and then like having to jump into like, you know, to like effectively working on a secondary degree in electronics at the same time because I've got a soldering issue that I have to solve. Like it's weird wearing that many hats sometimes. I sometimes worry that I'm not an expert at any of these things, just merely getting, you know, like I'm good at a handful of things, sort of all right at like another half a dozen things. Like, I don't know, it's hard to gauge. I've now trailed off and totally lost it.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Because that idea of, are you just a walking tribal knowledge factory then? Like, or do you have any of the stuff like documented or written down?
It all lives in my brain all the time. And if I could like eliminate about 20 years worth of The Simpsons, I would have a hell of a lot more space.
Let's go to, let's talk about dealing with customers. Being essentially the chief cook and bottle washer for No Guitars, is dealing with the people that give you the instruments to work with. Is that a necessary evil of the job, or is that a part of the job that you enjoy?
I'm bad at humans. Like I'm not the greatest at other humans. I care about other humans.
Right.
It's a really hard question to answer. Through this job, I've met so many fucking wonderful people that like I love dearly. I've met so many creative and interesting like individuals that I don't think I would really get anywhere else, you know. But at the same time, I've met some fucking turds who will remain nameless and rat-faced. I don't know. It's really hard to, you know, it's hard to manage people's expectations. I mean, most of the people that I do work for understand that, like, I am just a one-man show, and I'm going to do the best goddamn job that, you know, I can in every scenario. Like, there's no guitar that crosses my bench that gets, you know, more or better treatment than any other guitar. It doesn't matter what's on that headstock for me. Like, that thing has to go out the door playing perfectly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that takes time. I'm better at it now, like years and years later, of understanding how much time certain things are going to take. But you still have the odd job sneak up and totally upend that for you.
Yeah.
Most of the people I deal with understand now that, like, post 2019 and me sort of working myself to death and falling apart, I've taken some steps, not just limiting like how many things I take in and sort of working on a tattoo artist style schedule where it's like, I've got this many slots, this much time. If you've contacted me in the last couple of months, like now's your window. It's now, or we'll discuss it in a couple more months. Like, I stopped giving timelines to people. That had become such a huge point of anxiety for me.
Right.
Was, I try to turn around everything in a reasonable amount of time. I mean, but once again, only one dude. Like, and it's a lot of fucking work sometimes. In doing so, like, I kind of said to myself, in future, I don't want to be tied to this timeline issue. Like, I want to be able to approach things sort of more at my own kind of ease. So I'm not constantly overworking myself trying to juggle all of these different projects. Like, when people bring me stuff now, it's under the the agreement that, like, it's going to take as long as it takes. I will do my best to turn it around in a timely manner. But some things take a lot more work than other things, and the priority at the end of the day has to be sort of just keeping the lights on. There are certain jobs that I take that I do because I love them, but the pay is shit. So, like, if you bring me something like refinish, that can take a substantial amount of time. Like, building a guitar for someone now, I only take one build a year because literally I only have enough time and can only make X amount of dollars off of that one thing.
Right.
I can only afford personally to do one of them per year. The rest of that time is just spent banging out repairs. I try to not take on more than one or two, like, finish jobs at a time. I'm not talking about, like, dents and dings and stuff like that. I'm talking about, like, stripping bodies and necks and spraying, like, full fucking guitars and, restoring stuff and stuff of that nature. Like,
a calculation of time versus a calculation of money versus a calculation of overall enrichment for you, and kind of put all those things into a blender and kind of see.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, this is where, like, I'm really bad at articulating this stuff because it just, like, it all lives in my brain. Like, I've never sat down and drawn out an Excel sheet as to, what takes what amount of time and what amount of effort and what, like, I guess, I have actually, in a sense, because I've got a functional fucking price list for a lot of these jobs. Yeah. The bulk of all of it just lives in my brain all the time. When it comes to stuff like finish work, I mean, it's like one of the things I find more gratifying to do, but it's so costly and time consuming that, like, I can't do it and make money off of it unless that was the only thing I did. Do you know what I mean? Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, even the building, like, because obviously there must be just certain people that only build.
Very much so. Or certain people that have other people working for them and they're able to delegate some of the other stuff to them, therefore granting them the time to actually, like, pursue building. Like, I got into this to build. Like, my interest in guitars wasn't, like, when I started, it wasn't really about repairs. It was about, like, I want to make gnarly looking guitars, and now I want to make, gnarly looking pointy guitars.
That's when you graduate to the pointy stage. That's when you really make it.
I'm at pointy now. I've transitioned into pointy. It can be kind of disheartening at times, honestly. Like, I this is something I've wrestled with a lot in the last couple of years, where I'm bogged down with incredible amounts of super niche repair work and whatnot, and I'm like, I'm just fucking adjacent to, like, where I should be, not even where I should be, where I want to be, or where I wanted to be. Like, it's like I'm dream adjacent.
maybe always putting yourself like, because that's the stick and the carrot sort of situation, right? Like you're always pursuing, but never actually fully satisfying your dream or your ideal, right?
Yeah.
So, and so it's almost like you need to have some of that quote unquote shit work in the canister, so you can always appreciate when you get to the point where it's like, yeah, oh yeah, that's the stuff. This is the good stuff right here. So you almost have to build that in.
Unfortunately, it's also the shit work that keeps the lights on.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, utopia is an ideal for a reason, because it's not practical. It's people can't just do whatever the hell they want at all times, because society would collapse. You need people to clean shit up. That's the way it works.
Don't fucking tell me what to do.
Once again, not telling you what to do. I am simply stating an opinion.
You just torpedoed my dream. Like, well, you can't have utopia because
I'm sorry if no one's told you this before. It's just facts are facts, Robin. Facts are facts. Post COVID, and I don't want to talk too much about COVID. Maybe for starters, I'll ask you how COVID affected your work for let's say the last couple of years, and then we'll move on. So you don't have to wax tragic or poetic on it, but maybe how does it work? How did it work in sort of the lockdown era for you as a luthier?
I never really had to fully lock down because, I most of the time I spend at work, I spend alone. Mm-hmm. So, I was, during the beginning of COVID, like I did take some time off because it was like this huge, scary fucking thing that was kind of foisted upon all of us. And at that point in time, like who knew how bad shit was going to get? And, the liberal media, I'm just kidding.
All right, cut.
No, sorry. No, essentially, like in this day and age, the 24-hour news cycle tends to sensationalize like absolutely everything. And the fear machine during the early days of it was very real. Not unwarranted, but maybe overdone a bit.
A tad.
Having said that, it's all in hindsight. So, really, was it overdone? I think we got lucky in a lot of respects. But for me, to get back to the actual question, COVID worked out really well for me in the fact that it allowed me to take time and knock out some bigger, like long-term projects, I guess, like in the very beginning of it. There was a lot of the early days of it that I was just sitting at home playing in video games. But, I did actually, like, throughout that, I did actually work. And it also sort of like the breakdown I had in 2019, I had to walk away from work for a while. And I walked away for, several months.
Yeah.
Just to sort of like figure out, like, do I want to keep doing this? Is this for me? Like, this isn't what I signed up for.
Right.
I had to, come to some pretty harsh realizations about, I guess, my place in the world and how I wish to exist in it. But like one of the things that had really bothered me and pushed me sort of to this point was a glut of just like long-term projects that have been sitting in the shop that it was like, I got to do all this other stuff to keep the lights on. This is just going to sit here, and just coming in every day and seeing the same guitars, like mm-hmm. just sitting there in that state of disrepair. And it's like, I need to finish this.
Yeah.
I don't have time to finish this. I need to do all of this other stuff so my bills are paid. And like, I was like sort of like spinning out. So I took a few months off, and that few months sort of like lined up with the early days of COVID. So it was like I was going to be home sort of anyway.
Right.
And then, it allowed me though, like once I was like, all right, I'm ready. I just need to go back in and knock this stuff out and just, not like suck it up by any means. Sorry, air quotes, but like tiny screen.
You
it wasn't so much.
it was you bearing down, right? It would bearing instead of sucking it up, maybe bearing down might be a better.
Yeah, I found myself in that place where it was like, okay, I'm ready. Like this needs to be done. I'm the only person that's going to do it. Like, not to be a self-horn tutor, but I'm actually pretty all right at my job. I have a breadth of experience that not a lot of people have. Like, as far as my stupid knowledge of guitars, like I know how to make the donuts, right? Like,
yeah, you know what you're doing. Your work has actually spoken for itself. I know people that play guitars that you've built. I know people that play guitars that you have fixed. I have a guitar that you've built. It's one of my favorite things on planet Earth.
Shameless plug. Keep going.
No, I will.
Feed me with praise.
Well, yeah, but honestly, like your craftsmanship and your and your work speaks for itself. Like anyone who's touched anything you've built or made would be a fool to think it's anything but pretty close to perfect, to be honest. So there you go. There's your flowers.
I feel fucking gross now. Thanks.
That's exactly what I was aiming for. So it's like sort of running back through the timeline then. So 2019, you had to take a step back, and just as you were about to take a step forward, that was roughly around when the pandemic really started, the lockdown in early 2020. So it almost was serendipitous that when you felt ready to go back to work, that was when everyone had to stay home, which is a very interesting sort of sort of swimming against the current sort of thing, or maybe with
at the same time. I also fed my need to hermit, like my overwhelming urge to kind of hermit and just be alone, do my own thing, yada yada yada. Whether it was like the beginning of the lockdown where we were all stuck in our houses for X number of weeks, where video games and just family and stuff of that nature. Like, me coming back to work during the beginning of COVID wasn't that much different than that. I was lucky to be afforded another place where I could hermit.
Wow, I could hole up in two places.
When that lockdown happened, like I was just like, holy shit, I've been training for this my entire life. Like no human contact. Yes.
That's perfect. However, just to move on to the next portion of this question, I think for somebody who works alone fairly often, you ended up sort of linking up with a group of people. Do you like is it the Luthalong? Is that actually what it's called, or is that just the?
I think that's what it's called. It's through Ian Davlin, who's a tried and true Luth, based out of New Jersey at the moment, but has done his time at places like Breedlove and Lark Street and stuff like that. He started a Patreon page a few years back, and while I wasn't an early adopter by any means, like I now will absolutely sing the praises of it every chance I get. The only reason I'm a late adopter of it was I'm just so incredibly fucking awkward, and the whole idea of like being on webcam and talking to other humans like still makes me feel a little barfy at times. Like I've definitely got some anxiety.
Yeah, but with that being said, thank you, Luthalong, because now I have you in that exact position.
And it's only because of that Luthalong that I'm doing this right now. It's such an incredible wealth of knowledge. All of these other luthiers sort of at different stages in their careers, some just beginning, others sort of like shepherding, people like us along. Like, It's such a neat resource to like. Loothin is such an absolutely weirdly isolating and insular job in so many ways. And keep in mind, like early on, like I used to work in kitchens, like and doing kitchen work back in the day where there was too much alcohol and everyone was sort of disgusting, and like some of the greatest laughs I've ever had with other humans were in that work environment. And I think that's, sort of what makes you able to sustain and survive in that sort of environment. Like cooking can be kind of rough. But that sort of like camaraderie was something that I really, really missed. Like when I when I went to school for this, like it was in a shop in Toronto called the Canadian School of Luthier, run by a friend of mine named Jeremy Nix. There was like this beautiful little sort of sense of community that he was fostering, that like after I left that school and came back here and just started doing this thing fucking solo, like I missed it. And I tried to recreate it so many times and in so many ways, like, and just never got it right. And then, my friend Grace Tamarin, who is Guelph Guitar Repair on Instagram, totally knows her shit. Mm-hmm. If you live in Ontario, like, you can call her if you need stuff. Shameless plug. Done. And she kind of like, we've been having like a sort of like a weekly Instagram sort of video chat get together thing with her and Nate Wood, who is like staying guitars in Oregon, and East City, my friend Lewis, who's in like Peterborough. We're having like these like Monday morning sort of like get-togethers, just sort of chatting about Loothin and customer relations and stuff like that. It was basically just like an avenue for us to all get together and commiserate over how much Loothin fucking sucks sometimes.
Yeah, and it's like you created a water cooler.
But I see what Grace did now, where it was like, that one sort of step into that realm, like, it was totally her just dragging me towards that Luthalong and Ian Davlin and whatnot, who like I had already followed on Instagram for years at that point. It was neat though. Like it got sort of my foot in the water, and I became a little more comfortable being me in front of people. Might have some social anxiety where I, hate sort of situations like that most of the time. Like my idea of a good time is not going out and hanging out with people as much as I like. There are people that I love and I love seeing and whatnot. Like I'm just too fucking awkward for that life. I did a lot of it in my 20s and got over it in my 30s. And now that I'm in my 40s, it's just like, I'd rather just go home and sleep at this point.
Fair. Very fair.
I got forced out of my shell, and like, holy shit, it was such a good thing in so many ways. Like, not only just being able to network with all of these people all over the world who are doing this as well, but, like, there's this part of me that really loves it as this thing that is this like resource, this knowledge resource, and like so many different voices all giving you sort of like a different way to do something, or, you have a shitty customer interaction, or you fuck something up on the job, like these really weird high stress situations. You bring it sort of in there, and then everybody's got a story. Like everybody has the nightmare customer. Everybody has the job that just went off the fucking rails. And like that ability to commiserate with these other people in such an usually insular environment it's massive. I've definitely like grown as a luthier in the last year because of it. I would say very positively.
I guess it almost serves as a cloud for your brain's hard drive to sort of at least be able to deposit things too, right? Like, because this is a hive mind of people who do essentially what you do, all in their own way.
Hive mind of homies, in a way, where it's like, the jokes, the tomfoolery, the jackassery in this group of people. It's like, we're all sort of similar in a lot of respects. We all sort of came at this from, similar places, and the temperament and sense of humor. Like, I'm in it for the jokes at this point. That place has provided me with some really good laughs. Like they're solid folk.
Well, that's good. That's good. So shout out to that community. It seems to have been probably, because honestly, it feels like it might be something that a lot of people post-COVID and during COVID were utilizing, video chat, and the ensuing sort of isolation that was kind of brought on with lockdowns for a couple of years, I think led a lot of people, especially in cooperative spaces, especially in creative spaces and in cooperative areas, to have to resort to technology and to almost shoehorn humanity into technology, which is a kind of a beautiful thing, to be honest. Before 2020, I was getting up, I was putting on big boy pants every day. Some people have been afforded the luxury of being able to kind of stay at home and conduct themselves and have a life. You're pretty much a hermit. That this pandemic gave you like a side effect of a community vibe while you're by yourself. It's a pretty awesome thing.
Yeah, it actually really is. It's strange how that kind of played out.
Yeah.
I figured I was an island forever.
Yeah, but it turns out you're. It's like everyone's communicating like they used to on Star Trek. Like everyone's not an island now. Everyone's a starship. Where you can talk to each other on a big screen.
Or to keep it land based, part of an archipelago.
There you go.
Yeah.
So instead of it, yeah, I see what you did there. You went back to the better analogy. I fully support that. I'm very happy about it. Thank you very much. I'll probably
not trying to veto your tangential.
Oh, you know what? It deserved a good veto. There you go. Do you have any stuff that's on your bucket list left to work on or build, or like maybe a tentpole project that you really wanted to do?
My real focus now, aside from repair work and constantly keeping the lights on, is automation. I fully welcome our robot overlords. One of the biggest time sucks in this job is the fact that I have to do every goddamn thing by hand, or I have to build some stupid fucking tool for it by hand, or stuff of that nature. And we live in a day and age where stuff like 3D printing and like not commercial sized machines, but like there's sort of like this home based 3D crafting market, whether it's CAD, CAD machining things, or 3D printing them. Like that's the future, and I would be an idiot not to dive into that. I can see so many applications for it in the job I do, and I think in learning to do it, it's going to drag me back to what my original goal and sort of like dream was in this, where I draw the file, I print or cut the thing, but I can also walk away and do other things that earn money in that time. One of the things I'm most interested in is actually like metal fabrication, machining things. And like the idea of being able to produce a guitar in-house where it's not just like, a body and a neck that have been built and fretted like in my shop, but all of the custom plates and the bridge and like all of these components of this thing, I will have some sort of hand in that like, oh my God, that speaks to me. Like, it's not like an attempt to cut out the middleman or anything, but like, dude, I've seen so many guitars. I'm hardwired to solve problems. Right. So after years and years of seeing all of these guitars and like, getting to know the inherent problems in certain processes, in making these things and putting them out in the market. Like, I mean, I see so many things that could be amended or improved or scrapped and completely redone. And I think that, learning to 3D model things and make them myself is going to be the solution to a lot of this stuff. It even just something like cutting custom plates, like getting a decent laser cutter and cutting custom plates for different guitars and being able to, set something up to just print or cut or do this. it's almost like trying to develop, like, I guess, a passive stream of income. I mean, there's no stream of income that is truly passive unless you're some big dick banker. Being able to just start something and walk away and do something else and come back to a finished product that, you've seen it through all the stages, but you've got a machine doing it all for you.
Right.
That's my way out of this. That's my way out of constant repair work and constantly trying to grind and hustle to keep everything, like, to keep all the balls in the air at the same time. Like, it's owning your own business is dumb.
Well, I mean, I guess looking into the future then, as an entrepreneur, is there a retirement for an entrepreneur?
You keep throwing that word out like I actually fucking know what I'm doing or talking about.
Well,
like, as an entrepreneur,
you are. Like, I mean, there's no two ways around it. You have your own business. That's the way it works.
Ding dong in a dilapidated garage. Like,
I know, but you're also talking about 3D printing. It's a very, very interesting, subset of things. It's like, like you're talking about the future, yet you are living in filth. I don't know. I don't think you are. I think you're doing well.
Why are you such a dick?
Wait a minute. So I try like hoity-toity sort of words, and then you take it down. And then I was like, all right, fine. You're a pig in the mud. And you're like,
not you, Dennis. Christ.
I don't know what to say. So, okay. So as a dingus who makes string, you're a stringus dingus. How's that? Are you good with that? As a stringus dingus.
As a fan of Latin, I'm big. I'm into that. That works for me.
So, is there a retirement for this, or is this something you're just going to have to do until you can't do it anymore, and then see?
I'm going to die at my bench. I'm going to die at my bench. There's no retirement for me. We don't exactly live in a day and age where a guy like me can sock money away and dream of like sunsetting somewhere nicer than this shithole. I'm gonna have to do this until I drop. There's no retirement for me,
unless you can sort of 3D print a clone that can do all your work for you at one point.
Yeah, or I get like hit by a bus and live and get a huge insurance settlement out of it. Like that's really the only way I'm ever going to be able to retire.
That's a very elaborate plan. Basically, you could be, all of a sudden just be frozen in place, 85 years old, lacquer just spraying you in the face, and all of a sudden your light extinguishes, and that's what you think is going to be the end of you.
I work with nitro. I'm not living to 85.
All right.
I wear a respirator as like protection and whatnot for that environment, but like that shit is so toxic. Like I'm not living to 85.
All right, 84 then. When we first met and I started following you on Instagram, your whole sort of like online identity was either guitars you were churning out or records you were playing.
Yeah.
So you still play records in the shop, right? I can see behind you there is a record on your little wood block that shows what you're playing. So what's on the wood block right now? Right behind
that
you.
Would be the reissue of Sings Rain Rebuilder by Set Fire to Flames.
How does one set fire to flames?
I don't know, man. Lots of moving parts there. I can't even begin.
Are there records that you listen to for particular jobs or particular tasks? Like, do you have a record that is set for certain tasks?
Yeah. Every time I complete something and am content with it, usually it's like the end of a build or something that has, been a notable amount of effort to complete. I usually cap it off with listening to Slayer's Rain and Blood at like pretty much max volume from front to back. Like, it's the way Tom Araya like screams the beginning of Angel of Death. It's just like you finish this thing, and then it's like I get the catharsis of him doing that almost immediately after it. It's pretty fucking fantastic.
It's like when
every shriek, I'm just like, yeah, I feel that.
That's like the shriek of the bird at the beginning of the Flintstones. The beginning of the Flintstones where they pull on that bird. It's like, wah!
Yeah. Except it's so much longer and so much higher pitched.
It's true.
How did he do it? He's not even like a super little guy.
No, he's like a big barrel chested dude. Really, like if you look at him, it's like shaped like Rutger Hauer.
May he rest in peace.
May Rutger rest in peace. Indeed. Rain and Blood is what you play as basically your dinner whistle. Meaning like you're finally done. So let's throw on some Tom Araya screaming about Angels of Death. Are there other? Is it just like a rotation of stuff that you listen to in the shop that just happens to be whatever you're listening to at the time? Or are there other things that sort of coincide with tasks?
Nah, it's just whatever I feel like. I mean, no, that's actually not true. I listen to a lot of really fast metal shit when I'm doing like neck carves and stuff like that. Like things that I guess they aren't really like super rhythmic, but if you make them kind of rhythmic, it seems like less of a god awful chore to be doing it. So, it was determined at one point in time within this shop that, Metallica's Four Horsemen is like the perfect cutting song because it's just that beat. It's just like rasping the whole time. Like it works so well. So yeah, a lot of like crazy, speedy, fast stuff for stuff like that. If I'm doing just normal bench work, I mean, 99% of the time I've got music on as like filler. It's sort of just like taking up shop space in a way. I listen to a lot of like random kind of drone stuff, lots of stuff with field recordings and, not stuff that you can tune out, but stuff that isn't like overwhelming, I guess.
Oh, totally. I can relate to that. Sometimes when I need to concentrate on something,
thinking music.
Yeah. Well, it's music that can just sort of sit in the back of your head and sort of almost like play with the subconscious a little bit, and then you can sort of use your foreground to concentrate on the task. It actually is very very helpful sometimes to play stuff like drone and like minimalist stuff. Nothing too intricate. It definitely helps. I always found that lyrical stuff with lyrics, or even stuff that's fast, or because I love loud guitar music, but I can't try to do a task and also like a task that requires brain power and listen to anything lyrical, because it's like my brain will automatically start sort of processing the words that are being sung, even if they make no sense.
Podcasts. I cannot listen to podcasts in here. Podcasts in the car, totally fine.
Yeah.
Like that environment, but like I can't listen to podcasts in the shop while I'm trying to do stuff, because I'm so easily distracted sometimes that, like I find myself drifting off and actually like, really involving myself in this thing that should just be sort of like background.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Are there any parting words or any plugs, anything that you'd like to sort of say as a cap on this fine conversation?
I'm definitely going to like shamelessly plug the Ian Hates Guitars Patreon one more time, like not just as a, amazing resource of Luth knowledge, but also as a really solid community of humans. If you're interested in Luthing at all and like wondering how to do stuff. Like, I mean, every answer you're looking for ostensibly is on the internet, but sometimes it can be really, really hard to filter out like what is good information, what is bad information. Like, pretty much any job you run into in this line of work, like you can find usually 3 or 4 YouTube videos of other people doing it. But with experience comes the realization that a lot of those YouTube videos are absolute shit. Like,
oh, I know. Sometimes people utilize a little bit, they lean too hard on YouTube for even basic things, and they don't realize how bad things are until they break.
Yeah. Having a sense of community in this job is huge, and I think fundamentally leads to all of us becoming better luthiers. And just trying to weighing through stuff on your own at home, like that can be all, that can work until it fucking doesn't.
Yeah.
And not being able to kind of sift through what's good information and bad information, or not really have anyone to ask. Like, I mean, that's really, really daunting. And I found within this community, like, there's so many ways to skin a cat, which is like the worst analogy of all time. Being able to hear it from, multiple people with hands-on experience, like their sort of process or their experience doing this job or something of that sort of nature, like it's incredibly helpful.
Yep, absolutely. We'll throw links up to that, as we go here. And for yourself, I put slyly, I put at the bottom of your picture here your Instagram, which is one of my favorite accounts to follow. It is. Don't give me the disapproving look. You know how much I like it.
I guess.
So, Mr. Socially Awkward, would you like to also plug your own social media, or would you like me to just let that sit there?
It's been there the whole time, right? It's like if you didn't fucking figure that out already. I'm this guy right here.
There we go.
Right there. Yeah, that.
I'll clean that up in post. I'll try to superimpose. Follow me on No Guitars.
It's like Camp Krusty, Mr. Black.
Oh man, dude, this has been an absolute joy to talk to you and to pick your brain and to learn more about Loothin than I knew before I started this conversation with you. So I wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for talking to me and spending some time.
Anytime, man. I love you to death, but I wish I was better at articulating shit and not such a weirdo hermit.
Once again, we'll clean this all up in post. Well, dude, thank you very much. As always, I love you too, and we will definitely talk again. And all the best to you. And hey, keep on Loothin.